who's keeping the dollar up? Who's making the dollar global reserve currency? It's Chinese people, because other people don't really hold dollars.
We have one particular problem, and that's China. If they charge us, we charge them the same thing. This is the first of many.
De Verenigde Staten en China zijn in een economisch conflict terechtgekomen. Een handelsoorlog zelfs, waarin de twee leiders elkaar bestoken met tarieven en importbeperkingen.
贸易战不可取，因为不会有赢家。经济霸权主义更要不得，最终也将搬起石头砸自己的脚。
Maar volgens financieel journalist Maarten Schinkel gaat het conflict tussen de grootmachten niet alleen over handel. Er is op de achtergrond een veel grotere strijd gaande. Want de Chinese munt, de Yuan of de renminbi, gaat stilletjes het gevecht aan met de Amerikaanse dollar. De hoofdprijs is de positie van grootste wereldreservemunt.
Ik denk dat je nu eigenlijk de voorbereidende werken ziet die in China worden gedaan. En als je goed gaat kijken, dan zie je ze overal.
If you travel throughout Southeast Asia today, they love to take RMB. In fact, they prefer it over other currencies.
Even the dollar.
Even the dollar.
Chairman Mao famously said that political power grows through the barrel of a gun. In a way, you can also argue that international currency power grows through the barrel of a gun.
Dit is Tegenlicht. Welkom in de nieuwe financiële wereldorde. Andy Xie, voormalig hoofdeconoom van Morgan Stanley en commentator voor zowel Chinese media als bij het Amerikaanse Bloomberg, volgde die groei nauwgezet.
In 1998, China had no highway like in the United States or Europe. Now China has the biggest highway system in the world, bigger than the United States.
So that's only 20 years ago.
20 years ago, yeah.
Highway.
Building infrastructure and keep the economy very productive, supporting the export sector. And that is the virtuous cycle China has been experiencing. So China is now exports about $2.5 trillion, by far the largest in the world. So this is why we are here today. China now, the economy is still 1/3 less than the US, but China invests a whole lot more than the United States, saves a whole lot more than the United States. So China, most money is in China, not in the United States. We are already there. So if China doesn't change, but China is so big, the world is stuck because the money cannot circulate in the way it should be. Yeah, there's a difference between real money and just artificial money. Artificial money is basically you create money through leverage. Basically, a company used to have $10 debt. You add a $20 debt to this company, then you have an increase of money supply by $10.
Yeah.
Okay, but that actually does not create wealth because these $10 go to somebody and it becomes consumption. Yeah, okay, that's what the United States has been doing. Very little real capital accumulation, but lots of debt. Lots of debt. So the more and more currency, the country has not become richer. So what China should do is to have a global financial market to let companies all over the world to come to China to raise money. Now you have a population of 1,360,000,000, more than all the OECD countries combined. If you just want to export, basically other countries, they cannot have jobs anymore because over 800 million Chinese people working so hard. They do overtime, you know. So like my ex-colleagues at Morgan Stanley asked me when China joined the WTO, they asked me, what does it mean for us? I said, maybe you should take some time off, which is exactly what happened. So I think that the world cannot go on like that. Right now, China is at the crossroads. Lots of people are confused. They don't know what should be the next step. So I think that we have to wait for a while. China is kind of in this phase. They have to think through really what the country should be, who the country is for. All these big questions need to be answered.
You need a stable and important currency.
Absolutely, China needs an independent financial system, not pegging its exchange rate to the US dollar. It's like 100 years ago, Americans first realized that the dollar was more important than the pound sterling, because when they were trying to do bond deals, they found out very few takers in London or Paris, mostly sold in New York. So they realized that the money was in the United States, not in London or Paris. That's when the switch started. The Federal Reserve became more important central bank than the Bank of England. The U.S. now government debt is 100% of GDP, the private sector, the household sector debt is like 80% of the cars are bought with debt. So these countries is drowning in debt. At some point there's going to be a confidence crisis there. So I think the change would be triggered by the global economy not working anymore. If we have a major crisis, people should come to their senses. Like in 2008, people didn't want to come to their senses because all the people who caused the crisis, they had power. They used the monetary and fiscal policies to bail themselves out. They basically, the elites scared the people, said, if you let the financial system fall apart, the world will fall apart. You guys are going to be totally in big, deep trouble, which was not true. But the banks, what do you mean by financial system falling apart? The banks will continue to function. The government will say, I take over these banks. They will still conduct the day-to-day transactions. There will be no big impact, except that the financial markets will be much lower because suddenly the shares are not worth anything anymore. Right? Yeah. So that's the wealth redistribution we should have had. So we need a major crisis to wash out a whole generation of elites. These people should not be there.
And at what scale should I think of? Will it be a Lehman crisis scale? Or would it be
much bigger, much bigger.
Maar een verlies aan vertrouwen in de dollar zou ook voor China grote gevolgen hebben. Want het land heeft in de loop der jaren $3000 miljard opgekocht.
Who's keeping the dollar up? Who's making the dollar global reserve currency? It's Chinese people. Because other people don't really hold dollars. I think that it's going to be tension in the world. And the only way for China to make a big step forward is if we have a big crisis. If we have a big financial crisis. But China cannot have a crisis internally because Chinese government controls the financial system. So China doesn't have a financial crisis.
I always wondered, when you look at the economic history of the United States in the late 19th century, there were recessions, depressions and panics. The economy could shrink by like 10% or 12%.
That's right.
China never encountered. China is one smooth line going up.
They don't want an adjustment, so they bring the money to whenever there's misallocation of capital. Financial crisis comes from misallocation of capital. Now we have tons of misallocation of capital. So much overcapacity. Of course, your financial system is in trouble, right? Because all the capital is not making money. So, but in China, they just bring the money to sacrifice the people.
But it will be inevitable at the end.
Because Chinese people actually, it's in the United States, it was the gold standard. You cannot dilute the people's money because it was based on gold. In China, there's no such thing. You say that it's based on the US dollar, but they can move it from time to time if they want to. Like they've been devalued the currency by over 10% in the last year or so. For an economy that is investing so much, so productive, you're still devaluing the currency? Because they want to print the money to bail out of the financial system. So China can keep doing that. And because China is so big, when China devalues, the global inflation gets taken down because Chinese goods become cheaper, then the Federal Reserve can print more money. And so this is kind of a treadmill. It can go on and on and on. It's been going on for like over 20 years. When in 1995, when Alan Greenspan said, something's wrong. You know, the bond yield keeps falling. Inflation is nowhere to be seen. What's going on? He was like confused. It was China.
The role of the state, although the private sector is, year by year, occupying a more important role in allocating resources in the Chinese economy, the state remains an important player. Because I don't think Chinese policymakers will ever want to give the market full control over allocating resources across the Chinese border. And that, I think, is a fundamental problem for the entire project of internationalizing the renminbi, because we just happen to live in an international monetary system in which the definition of a reserve currency happens to be equivalent to the definition of a fully convertible currency.
I don't think the government really wants it. Because that means that you have to go through all the political reforms to make it happen. I don't think they want. They would like to. They like the perception of RMB going international, becoming important, because it's part of the story of China's rise, and they need to sell this to the people, right? But I think they are much more comfortable with China kind of not partially open and under the government's control. And when the government feels uncomfortable, they can close the door a little bit more. And when the government feels confident, they open the door a little bit more. It's the whole thinking is based on the bird cage. Chinese culture governance is very much like a bird cage. The people are like birds in a cage. When the government decides how big the cage should be. When the government, so whatever reform China has, it's never open-ended.
If it will remain the case that the renminbi will never be fully convertible in the way that the dollar or the euro or the yen are fully convertible, then it's kind of impossible for the renminbi to be a reserve currency in the current international monetary system. And I emphasize that because if you think back to Bretton Woods, for example, the international monetary system that we had for the 20 years or so after the Second World War, there were lots of capital controls. The UK had capital controls until 1979. So depending on how you shape the international monetary system gives you answers as to what can constitute a reserve currency within that international monetary system. So in a way, one way of taking that thought forward is to say that the renminbi might well become a proper international reserve currency in the future, but only if the rules of the game change.
In China, the roadblock to reforms is political. Yeah. Basically, you have to sacrifice all these government officials who are having a lot of money doing things, and they are actually lining their pockets too. So it's very much about internal politics. So if there is an existential threat to the government, they will do it. Yeah. So I think that that's why a huge crisis will be very good for China. China can weather that well, and it will be a catalyst for deep-rooted reforms that China desperately needs. Then there will be a new world that will be born. It's much more based on the East as an anchor for the global economy.
Met een economische hegemonie en ook met de monetaire hegemonie, die daar in wezen de kroon op dat werk is, daar komt er natuurlijk heel veel mee. Als je kijkt hoe Europa is veranderd na de Tweede Wereldoorlog, hoe de Amerikaanse hegemonie daar heeft plaatsgegrepen.
Of course, you have a cultural influence. The question is to be prepared. My generation had been prepared to the ways of American products, American attitudes. and we take what we want. McDonald's, we take rock and roll music and so on. I think that we have to work in this direction. To prepare, it's not useful to be afraid by China. We need to know China, to talk with China. We need to understand what China is.
It's very difficult to have multiple reserve currencies. Global trade is so big now, it's over 20% of global GDP. And the financial system is so vast, right? Every day we have trillions of dollars in transactions. Once you have a benchmark, the whole market will gravitate towards that. So that's how it works. We are not really moving from one world to another smoothly. Even if you look at it from pound sterling to the US dollar, don't forget we got 2 world wars in between. So I think my hunch is that we're entering a period of great uncertainty.
Chairman Mao famously said that political power grows through the barrel of a gun. In a way, you can also argue that international currency power grows through the barrel of a gun. In other words, the country that supplies the international reserve asset is usually the one with the biggest military. That leaves some uncomfortable forecasts if the renminbi is at a point where it becomes the dominant international currency. We'd be in a very different world.
Als je doordenkt en je kijkt naar de manier waarop de VS in wezen de wereld bestuurd hebben via de dollar, bijvoorbeeld via buitenlandse politiek met dollars, het feit dat de Amerikaanse centrale bank eigenlijk de centrale bank is geweest van de hele wereld. Hè. Als de Chinezen die rol krijgen, dan is de Chinese hegemonie natuurlijk compleet. En dan heb je hem, ik neem aan, tegen die tijd militair. Je hebt hem economisch. En als sluitstuk, en het is altijd het sluitstuk, heb je hem financieel.
Dear passengers, people who travel without tickets or behave disorderly or smoke in public areas will be punished according to regulations, and the behavior will be recorded in the individual credit information system. To avoid any negative record of personal credit, please follow the relevant regulations and help with the orders on the train and at the station.
Wilt u ook een duit in het Chinese zakje doen? Kom dan naar de meetup in Pakhuis de Zwijger in Amsterdam. Of naar een meetup bij u in de buurt. Zoals in De Zwarte Olifant in Hoorn of in de bibliotheek in Utrecht. En luistert u vooral naar onze 2-wekelijkse podcast Future Shock. Dit keer een gesprek met valutahandelaar Georgette Boele over de opmars van de Chinese munt. Te beluisteren via uw favoriete podcastplatform of op onze website vpro.nl/tegenlicht.